Hi everyone, Melanie here, Rinaldi Performance. We are ready here this Saturday for another episode of Above Water Coaches Series. We are waiting for Igor Kopecky to join us for another episode of our series. We are going to be speaking about staying in the zone, or how to remain challenged while you're in the zone. So let me see if I can have Igor join. Explain this. There he is.
Hi, Mel.
Hi, Igor. Good to see you.
Good to see you. After a few little complications, I hesitate to use the word karma, but I made fun of my brother for not being able to get into an Instagram chat that we did earlier, and then today backfired. I'm going to blame my phone and the lack of capacity to handle multifunctions at the same time. But anyway, here we are.
It's okay. We worked around it, and we just got to remain flexible, right? And just got to roll with the punches. So we're a couple minutes late, but it doesn't matter. We're still going to get chatting and talking about this important topic, which is how to remain challenged and in the zone without succumbing to overtraining or possibly exerting yourself to possible injuries. And how do you remain in a place where you're constantly challenging yourself and you're focused on the prize at the the light at the end of the tunnel. So what do you think about this topic?
This is kind of one of my favorite coaching themes, really, and working themes, and I think it ties into all the different elements. And one of the, we have in Canada these Petro-Canada coaching conferences, and at one of these conferences, one of the coaches talked about his coaching philosophy and getting the most out of an athlete and getting the most out of performance all has to do, and he related it to the spark plug. So if you want your car to work perfectly, your spark plugs often have to get adjusted and you have just the right distance. If the spark plug is too close together, then the spark won't catch properly and it won't burn properly. If it's too far apart, it doesn't work properly. It has to be at exactly the right spot to get the ideal amount of combustion to burn, and your car can drive as fast as possible. Well, in terms of athletics and in terms of sport, we also want to be in that ideal zone. And there's so many different elements of that, whether it's, training, learning. Back from my education background, I know that when you're learning things, you want to be like engaged, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so, if it's boring, you're not going to remember it. Or right. If it's so complex you can't understand it, you're not going to remember it. Right. So it's all like, I think so many things apply to being in this right zone, and
the application of that information, right? So a lot of times,
application of that, yeah.
And the delivery. So there are so many. Let's say you have a great body of work, which I've encountered with different instructors or teachers. They have a great body of work, but if it's explained in a way that's overwhelming, like you said, it will be lost. If it's explained in a way that's too simple, you won't be challenged enough. So the delivery of these messages, of these tools, is just as important as the message itself.
Yeah, and then just relating to yourself, to ourselves as athletes, when you're, we want optimal performance. We're trying to perform extremely well and train really well. So our training should kind of be in that right zone. Related to diving, I would say, we're working. If you're doing things that are too hard for you, you're not really going to get better.
Right.
Like, they're just going to stay kind of messy. You've seen divers that they don't have like the polish and the cleanness, but they're doing hard dives.
Right.
Or maybe they stepped ahead a little bit too much. And then, you don't want to, it's hard in diving to go too easy, but if you're doing easy things, then we're going to be really demanding on how the execution of those things is.
Right.
And
we've seen it in competition. We've seen smaller lists win or get on the podium, outscoring and outbeating harder lists. So it's the same thing even in weightlifting. I was involved in weightlifting for a while. You see all of these people throwing these heavy weights around, and their technique is terrible, and their shoulders are shot, and their knees are banged up. Of course, they're lifting the weight. It's very impressive, but it looks like crap. So then what's the point? And you're missing the basics and the fundamentals. So I think it goes back to balance. for me as an athlete, when I was diving and, I learned a lot of the harder dives, and it was very important for me to always come back to the fundamentals. So I never had, I realized that when I did train too much on the optional dives or on the difficult dives too many times that week, they would start to get sloppier, because then I would just want to be, I would focus on just I wanted them to be better and be better and be better. And I would just train the dive. But in reality, to really polish up that dive, you got to come back down to the fundamentals and really start nailing your lead ups, nailing the basics, double bouncing simple things, and just really adjusting your technique and refining that technique, so that when you get to the harder dives and you're doing them again, even if it's less frequent, they're better quality, right?
Yeah. And then this kind of ties in with the mental aspect of it, because once you're comfortable enough and executing certain moves really well, you obviously got to be comfortable enough with your optional dives to do them that you can actually think about what you just did in the lead up, or how to come out or how to grab your hands on an entry, that you can start applying it. And then it's thrilling when you start doing those things and it translates into your harder skills.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like, and not just diving, but when we play other sports, if you pick a tennis partner, the best tennis partner is someone exactly at your level. Like, if they're too easy, if they're not very good and just a total beginner, it's not really very much fun. And
Right.
if they're just destroying you, that's
Right.
only fun for sadists and masochists who just want to experience pain. But you want to be with someone like really close to your level, so that you have a chance to win, but you've got to work hard. And same thing for them.
Right.
And
so when I mention oftentimes when I transitioned from my smaller club to Camo, right? So when I transitioned from the smaller club, if I would have transitioned probably sooner into that big Olympic team filled with all these superstars, I would have probably fallen apart. But I was ready and old enough, and even so, it was much more challenging than I was capable, but I was able to adjust, right? So the timing is really important. Like you mentioned, it's super important to have the physical ability, the technical ability, the emotional awareness and strength to overcome these fears of doing these dives, so that you could not only conquer them, but then really work on them as you move forward, right? And so, if you're that's why, let me finish my thought here. If you're gonna do something, when you're younger, you do see younger athletes that do have that level of maturity. Alexandre Patsy is a perfect example of being an 11-year-old that won Commonwealth Games, right? He was at a superior emotional and psychological level that he
13, yeah.
Oh, was he 13? Sorry, he was 13. Okay.
He was amazing at 11.
Right.
But he won Commonwealth at 13.
13. I think, actually, I'm thinking about Tom Daly. I think I saw him when he was 11 winning something, but it might have been just an international meet. Anyhow, both of those athletes, phenomenal, very headstrong, very emotionally and psychologically mature for their age. That's why at 15, Tom Daly won world championships against these monster male platform divers. Mm-hmm. And that's why Alexandre Patsy won Commonwealth Games with his braces on, besides these monster guys, because they had that capability. You can take the same age group and they might fall apart in a situation like that. So I think it's important to look at the athletes and individualize for who is able to progress in certain situations and then challenge that accordingly. So I think one of the problems that I had also as an athlete was putting everybody in the same group. You want to be challenged according to what you're capable of at your state, and then also your level of ability to progress. So if you're a fast learner versus a slow learner, or if you can recover from a failure quickly versus be demoralized for months over a failure. And then, of course, work on those things, on how to improve those to keep getting better at those weaknesses. But of course, modifying and adjusting how you're going to train an athlete or even know yourself and how you're going to come back. So, coming back from failures is huge. That's somebody that you can try the harder dives and push harder. But then if you fail, that you could come back the next day or that same week and then try again, versus someone who needs to work on building that mental strength still.
Yeah. And I think you've hit on a couple really key things, that it is individual. like you had Alex and Tom Daly are examples of these phenomenal talents. But while they were phenomenal talents, they were still working with their coaches within that frame for them. Their curve happened to be very steep and they could accelerate very fast, but they didn't go too fast. It didn't go too slow. We've seen a lot of super talents kind of burned out or having bad technique because they were doing like the super hard dives too early. Like Alex and Tom just kind of always, you never saw them doing anything like hackish or not very good. They were always just kind of at that limit of their of their skills, which then they're like super engaged and great competitors. And it just is this positive feedback loop. So it's like, it's dangerous to be in that training group and go, well, he's doing that, I should be doing that. And then wow, like I've had my fair share of time being way out of my comfort zone. And, you know, I had a few wipeouts before I kind of had a coach. Really, when I got to Hui Tong, the Chinese coach came to Canada, coached in Australia. And he was like a master at that zone. And it made training exciting and good. And then, you know, I never wiped out again. It was like, just was always right in there and just getting better and feeling it and understanding things as well. And so I think most of us now, we don't have coaches, so we got to put our own barriers or see where we are in that thing. And I think you alluded to it as well with, you know, the talk about injuries. If you're getting injured frequently, then maybe you're pushing things a little bit too much. Sometimes injuries are bad luck and you can't help it, but if there's just strings of injuries, you're doing probably too much.
Right. Or it's an opportunity to look at where do you feel those injuries, right? So if you're, for example, if you're a younger diver, you're learning a back 2.5 pike on 3 meter, and you have a great 2.5 tuck, but you're learning a pike and you're feeling pain in your lower back, that could be a physical limitation. You might need to strengthen and build up that strength, and you might not have the power yet to do that dive. So you need to come down and evaluate what exactly is standing in my way. So you want to be challenged. So maybe you're ready, but maybe something else inside of you is not ready. Maybe physically you're not ready, or maybe you're ready physically, but maybe mentally you're not ready. But either way, you need to identify those things, those triggers inside of you that either will stand in your way or push you forward. For me, it was important to look at what was ahead. It was important for me to look at Aaron Bulmer, to look at Blythe Hartley, people that I didn't train with on a regular basis that jumped to the sky and made me want to jump right there, right next to them, you know? And if I wasn't strong enough, when I went back home, I wanted to make sure to become strong enough. But again, even in weightlifting.
You were strong enough.
Again, in weightlifting, you have to progress, just like in diving. You have to progress. When you start to jump steps is when you'll falter and they'll come back to bite you, right? So I think Hui Tong was amazing at respecting people's limitations and seeing what their potential was, and he would just guide you in there. And then when you feel like you're succeeding, that motivates you to continue to not only trust your coach, but trust yourself and your ability, and that maybe he knows what's best for me, and I need to just trust him and trust this process. And then you're growing and learning about each other together. And I think that's super important for a coach-athlete relationship, and for you learning about yourself, because as you're growing as an athlete, you might not know what you're capable of either. And I remember that even as an adult, with training with Randy, that he, I always felt like he thought I was capable of more than I was. And I really just should have trusted him more and less listened to myself. And it got me pretty far, but it could have gotten me farther with less injuries, right? So yeah, this is a topic that's close to my heart because I was plagued with injuries, because I had a tendency to really push farther physically, and I probably could have benefited from pushing the same or less physically and maybe more mentally and emotionally, which
you're telling me just the exact telltale signs of going on you're going across that barrier. Yeah, and I was just suggesting that, you were almost the textbook example of, maybe doing too much too soon and getting injured, right? Like, because you're not the wimpiest person I've ever met. So for you to be injured is an indication that maybe you were trying to do too much or too much too soon. And just like you were talking about in the weight room, you know, sometimes it's hard. Like you started a little bit later, you're trying to catch up to these people. Everything takes their time and takes their process. And as you get impatient and want to try and get
Right.
there, it's a strain. And sometimes whether it's in the weight room, you're like just doing too much too soon,
Right.
or even diving or doing certain diving mechanics. If you're not landing well in the water or kind of cheating things, there's some
Right.
repetitive strain. So it's
Yeah. I
rest
mean, I
is
really,
one of those things you want to plan for as a coach and as an athlete, and
for sure. I
stay
mean,
in that zone.
I remember I probably had, I mean, and this happens often, but I remember specifically when I learned how to spot, right, backs and gainers. And I was 23 years old and I was training over the summer with Aaron Ziver. And Chris Kalick, who was my training partner for most of my life at Camo, he was there on either, I think on a 3-meter tower next to me at Camo, and I was on springboard. And I remember Aaron was filling in for Cesar, but I remember Cesar telling me constantly, sorry, Henderson, it's like a picture. You're supposed to see it. It's like a flash and it's like a picture, and you're supposed to see that picture. And I'm seeing this go by, like a lot is going by. And I remember Chris Kalick giving me the nudge at the right time to see and just said, you have to be willing to wipe out, but you got to change the way you see things. And Chris wasn't the best spotter out there.
No, he's speaking from experience. Like he
Yeah.
did not spot when he was learning his dives. Like
Right. And he came from the same generation. When he was at Point Claire, that you went with the strength of the athlete and they're able to do these dives, but maybe technically they're not doing them as well. So I remember learning back to an F tuck, back to an F pike, even at 15 years old, 2 or 3 years after, because I was strong enough, but I was just feeling the dive, which a lot of divers probably do now. It wasn't until almost 10 years later that I actually started seeing the picture and realized that for backs and gainers, you don't see backwards. You actually see them forwards, you know, and it was a tremendous aha moment for me, a success for me. And I realized that I had been doing so much wrong till then. And I had been wiping out on all sorts of things. I couldn't do basic drills like reverse 1.5 tuck and pike on 3-meter because if you don't spot, God help you. You know what I mean? And when that happened, I realized, oh, this is going to take me to another level now. And I wish that had happened so much sooner because I had already had a bunch of injuries then, just from like looking back on backs and gainers, you know?
Yeah. And just the consistency you build and the feeling, because spotting and feeling go hand in hand. So the earlier you build your spotting and feel,
right,
well, then you eliminate a lot of pain and it just makes diving fun. It's right. Like imagine you're playing tennis and you're like, you know, you're going to hit your shot. You might get hurt. You might hit yourself with the racket or maybe not. Like, no, that's not fun.
Yeah. And who wants to be on 10-meter? I was on 10-meter like that. And I remember like, I did not, for the life of me, I was like, nope, I'm not doing backs and gainers because I knew better. Now I'm 3 stories up in the air and you want me to do a blind dive with literally not knowing where I am? No. So,
Yeah.
you know, I definitely am here now to be an advocate for doing things slightly different. I'm a walking example of what not to do and what to do. I definitely had the heart and the drive. And I wish, you know, because I did start, and you hit the nail on the head, because I did start later and I saw all these amazing people like Alita and Emily and Blythe. I wanted to be like them and I wanted to hurry up and get there because I am not the most patient person. So, you know, I felt like I could do it and I did it, but I might have done it a little bit wrong. In the wrong. So again, I wish I would have had this conversation as a teenager or even as a young adult about how to maintain proper training in that zone and continue to challenge myself and use more of my brain and less of my body, basically, so that I can have a long, prosperous career. Because once I figured that out in my 20s, my career got better. But then it was short-lived. It was only a couple of years after that I retired. Yeah. So
it takes a long process. Like it takes a long time, even doing everything right. And not everyone has that sort of the blessed wiring or circuitry like an Alex or a Thomas.
Right.
And so that's a little bit harder too. I know, you know, for some athletes, it doesn't mean you're not going to get there, but they almost had adult-like coordination when they were children. So that's, you know, one reason why they're progressing so fast.
Right.
And
why they're phenoms. They're phenomenal, right?
And other people kind of they don't get there necessarily, but you can still get really good. Like I can think of a lot of top level athletes that just took a little longer to get there, and maybe they missed out. And this is the challenge, because mentally then, you know, the phenoms, they already know they're the best. And if you develop later, you have this sort of self-concept that you're not so good.
Right.
And then you tend not to compete out of your mind. But I think
right.
still stay in the zone. It's still more beneficial than trying to get out of it, and then you won't get there.
But that's where the coach can come in and help the athlete with that. Because building self-confidence is gonna work in your favor for the rest of your life. It's gonna work in your relationships, in your academic life. It's gonna work in your work life, post diving. And so that's where the coach can really learn some skills on to how to tap into the insecurities and the weaknesses of their athlete and turn those into strengths.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for your patience, Igor.
Well, thanks for being patient with me, and then we worked it all out.
Awesome. Right. I will see you next Saturday. Have a wonderful weekend, and all the best
you
to
too.
everyone watching.
Bye.